Annie, no, it is not. And I love that you've asked me this because I see that as well as a business coach. People are so afraid. But for me, one of the things that has helped me is honestly being in the same situation with people who either have done what you want to do or are trying to do. And one thing I've realized is even the people you look up to are afraid.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
We all know that first impressions count. Yet, rather than putting their best foot forward, most big-hearted, well-intended coaches are unknowingly starting their relationships with their prospective Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color clients on the wrong foot, asking questions like, "Where are you from originally? Wow, your English is so good for a Black person. Your skin tone is not dark enough. Are you sure you're from Africa?" Hey, we have a scholarship program to support people just like you. These are subtle yet gut-punching microaggressions can feel like death by 1,000 cuts for a person of color as they continually are reminded they don't belong. And that is why I will be hosting a live training called Microaggressions 101 to support you to hold safer spaces in your online coaching business that will see you serve a wider and more racially diverse audience. Head over to anigishuru.com/LT. That's Anigishuru, GICHURU.com/LT. The LT is for live training. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast with me, Annie Gishuru. And today I am joined by a fellow sister, fellow Kenyan. Her name is Mumbi Hinga. And I am so excited to have you here, Mumbi. Karibu sana.
Asante sana, Anne. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's such a pleasure to be part of this. And I love the title Represented. It's so poignant. And I'm glad you invited me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am too. You know, I love that before we press record, you reminded me of how we connected because we don't know each other personally. And so you're somebody I reached out to on LinkedIn and I said, "I love what you're doing. I'd love to have you on my podcast." And you said yes. And I was like, man, she doesn't even know me. And she's just said yes. I think there's that trust, that sisterly bond, both of us, you know, being from Kenya. But also the connection through Yemi Pen. Yemi, if you're listening to this, thank you for sharing our conversation that we had. I think it was about a year ago at the time of recording this.
Yep, probably.
And Mombi saw that and then connected to me. So there's a trust is built from those kind of connections. Hey.
Oh, yes, of course. And that's how I connected with you. And so by the time you reached out to me, I was, even though to you didn't know me, I was already familiar with you. I've seen the conversation with Anastasia, who is a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And we also work together as well in some coaching and training aspects. So you're actually not a stranger to me. I know you.
So you were waiting for me to get in touch. You're just like, it's just a matter of time. She's gonna drop by and get in touch. Hey.
Well, I don't know, but I guess, when it happened, I knew I was like, yes, definitely, that's something I'd love to do.
Oh, well, I'm so glad we're doing this now, Mumbi. I I love your story, the little bit that I know. And
Hmm.
I really haven't done extensive, research on you, just what I could piece together here and there. And so there will be a lot of bringing us along on your journey to how you got to where you are right now. But what
Hmm.
I do like and what I want to start with is the fact that you were a nurse. You were a nurse, and that was your background. And this is something that a lot of Black women, a lot of women who come from African backgrounds can relate to, because when
Hmm.
they go to other countries to further their studies, the entry into the workforce is mainly through healthcare, through being a nurse. And I have a good friend of mine, I don't know if you know her, her name is Jessica Bailey. And she's written a book called I Am Not a Nurse, because a lot of times she was in spaces where people just either thought of her as being a nurse or promoting her and saying this is the direction that you need to take if you want to earn money. And so, Mumbi, just take us through how you transitioned from being a nurse into the work that you're doing. You're a business coach,
Hmm.
you are a filmmaker,
Yeah.
and you're a festival, film
Director.
festival director.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Well, Annie, it's a long journey, but even before we get to the part where I was a nurse, when I look at our backgrounds, for example,
Yes,
when I was young, even when I was in school, I loved creative arts, I loved music, I loved things like drama.
yes,
But even in the environment where we grew up, in many circumstances, those things were seen as hobbies, right?
that's
So
right.
even when we were thinking about what careers are we going to pursue, it was
Mm-hmm.
highly unlikely that I would have gone to my dad and told him, hey, dad, I want to be a filmmaker. He'd have been like, what are you, like, what are you on about? And like, for example, one of the things I loved and I was very good at was music.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came, and so for the first year, of course, your parent is very happy to pursue those things and thrive and do well in those things. But when things are getting more serious, when you're going to second year, third year,
Yes.
you don't even need to be told that music is likely not going to be one of those subjects,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's elective, which it was. So you grow up with this mindset that there is a hierarchy. And even now, and it's not just in Kenya, there
Yes.
is a hierarchy of subjects. There
Yes.
is a hierarchy of careers. And so some of the things are not celebrated, especially the arts. So it's just one of those things that I had to squash when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger. So you have to
Yes.
squash it and really just see them as things that you will have to pursue on the side as hobbies. And so,
Absolutely.
of course, when it came to deciding what I wanted to do, it was very difficult for me after high school to decide what I wanted to do because nothing interested me. I actually started by doing accounting, believe it or not. And
Wow.
yes, I started by studying accounting because I was good with numbers, but
Yeah.
I just never enjoyed it. And then, it was actually my dad's advice for me to pursue nursing. And because I was so undecided, I just agreed because at the end of the day, these parents of ours, they're well-meaning, right? They
Absolutely.
want stability, they want financial security for us. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
script that many of us know by heart.
Yes.
And I always acknowledge and appreciate the idea for my family to help me pursue something that was going to guarantee me financial stability. And now, moving forward, coming to this country, right? You don't know much, right? And so
Yeah.
you're thinking, okay, I want something that is going to be stable.
Mhm.
And sometimes you're also thinking of, do I want to stay in the country, right? If you want to stay in the country, there are some certain professions that will
Yes.
allow you, yeah, to stay in the country. And
Mhm.
of course, for me, it was nursing. But then I just happened to be in this country where people were changing careers. Like I had a friend who was that was more than probably close to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This friend of mine was in their 40s and they decided they wanted to do medicine. And for me, I'm thinking, oh my God, medicine is not 3 years. Medicine
Yes.
is a long commitment. And then you realize you're actually in this environment where you can you can change. And not to say that you can't change anywhere else,
Mhm.
but I had already set myself the foundation. I was working as a nurse. I was financially stable. At the
Right.
time, I didn't have kids. So I've got this independence to then try and think, okay, I need something. There's still something nagging at the back of you. So I thought, oh, I've always wanted to pursue something to do with the arts, something to do with storytelling. I loved literature as well. And so I went ahead and did a filmmaking course. I think that was in 2015. I studied filmmaking, and that just opened up things for
Wow.
me.
Yes. Yes.
So as soon as I studied, so one of the girls I met when I was doing filmmaking, her name is Hawanatu. She's a film director.
I know how
Oh,
Anatu.
you know how not to. Oh my
Yes.
goodness, our world is gonna get so small, I think.
Yes.
So Hawanatu told me, there's this there's this group of women that I know, and we've been talking about doing a story like a film, and so I met these ladies and we started talking about storytelling, and sometimes we talk about representation. But then we are aware that sometimes we have to create these platforms ourselves. And so this led us to forming a production company called Afro Sisters,
Mhm.
and started writing stories. We looked for support and did a proof of concept, created, to create a web series. And so that was one of the things that kind of started me in this journey of
Wow.
filmmaking.
You have shared so much that I feel relates to my journey as well.
Mhm.
Um, Coming into this country a good 24 years ago now,
Wow.
that I've called Australia home. I came here with the picture, the idea that I would get into the media landscape. I studied mass communication, really wanted to get into television and media from a journalistic perspective. But because there wasn't any representation, it became so hard for me to be something that I couldn't see. And back then, there was hardly any people of color. There was actually, let me put it this way, there was no person of color that I personally knew of,
Mhm.
in the main television stations. And so that's a dream I kind of pushed to the side and
Mhm.
went off in a different direction, not knowing, had I known what I know now back then, I would have possibly pushed on so that I can be what is possible for those who come after me. And so, as you're sharing your story of how our parents raised us to pursue uh, work that is more financially stable, work that is more within spaces where we it's not necessarily something that we enjoy, but it's something that will give us that financial stability and security.
Mhm.
I can
Mhm.
so relate to
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
what happens is the older you grow, you want to have something more meaningful and fulfilling, something that makes you feel like you're making a difference and it excites
Mhm.
you. And so I'm so happy that you're sharing your story, Mumbi,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
yours is not everybody's story. Yours is probably one of the very blessed ones, if I may say that, whereby
Wow.
you've
Yeah.
pursued your passions. A lot of people are still stuck in careers that they can't quite get out of because of the security that it offers them, or
Mhm.
because of the historical marginalizations that exist in terms of, if I get out of this, then it's going to be very, very difficult for me to put food on the table for
Mhm.
myself or for my
Mhm.
family. And so I see you as being so blessed to have found something that you love and be able to make that transition from a career that wasn't quite fulfilling to now being that business coach and that filmmaker. It's absolutely, it's just an inspiration. It's not many people have that. And so thank you so much for following your heart because it's inspiring others. I'd love to know what's the genre of the storytelling that you do as a filmmaker? What kind of stories are you telling?
I think I don't know if I've found a genre yet. Even if I've been doing this for a while, I think I'm still trying to figure out what kind of stories I'm gonna tell because I just feel like there is so much to tell. So the first thing, the most important thing was for that representation, right? For people to, I have children. I want, when they're growing up, because you see, one of the things we might tend to ignore is, for me, I grew up in an environment where when I looked around, everybody looked and sounded like me, right? So I'm used to
Yeah.
that. And so when I come here, and I came here when I was, I wasn't that young, I was in my 20s when I moved here. So I kind of already had that foundation, and it was easy for me to kind of go like, oh, okay, this is a bit different. Where are my people? Right.
Mhm.
And that actually led me to moving. I went to Gold Coast. That's where I was. I was in university at Gold Coast.
Yes.
And I realized, oh, I need to be in an environment where I didn't feel a sense of belonging. I needed a community, right? But for me to be able to recognize that was helped by the fact that I was already part of a community. And not to say that you cannot be part of a community that looks and sounds different from
Yes.
you, but for me, that was part of my upbringing, and I felt that, and I'm very open to being part of many communities, but I needed my people around me, and that just didn't exist in the Gold Coast. And as much as I like being, like setting foundations for things, I think that was too much of an emotional burden for me to try and be like, okay, let me be the pioneer of, the African community. So then it was easier for me to move to Sydney, and, find already a thriving African community. So then when I'm doing these things, I'm thinking of, these younger generations, right? And even people my age. So we want them to tell, the stories are so diverse. To come back to your questions, the stories are so diverse that at the moment it's really just about, like, actually the film festival, our tagline was, we are here. That's it.
We are
We
here.
are here, and then we'll figure out what are we doing here. you
Mhm.
know so I think because there's so many stories we can tell, I think at the moment it's really just about amplifying our voices and feeling represented.
And when you say our voices, just to be clear, because there are people listening from all parts of the world, who do you mean we? Who is we?
So I'm very big on working with women.
Yes.
So I want, like, our production company, we are all women, and so we want to amplify the voices of women. We want to
Mhm.
amplify the voices of African women, the African community. That is one of the things that brought up the African Film Festival, because we can't always be saying, please represent us, please show our stories, right? So that's what I mean, like the African, and Friends of Africa as well,
Yes. Yes.
right?
And so the
So
tagline, we are here.
we are here. So this is really about representing and amplifying the voices of the African community.
That is beautiful. I love that. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. All right, let's change gears now and
Mhm.
talk a little bit about your coaching journey. Uh, where did business coaching come from?
Well, funny enough, with business coaching, I had no plans to become a business coach. I didn't sit one day and think, I want to pursue, like, I never tried to be a business coach. What I wanted was, okay, so I decided I want to go into filmmaking. So I wanted to be in a position where I'm still making money, right? But within my own time so that I can be able to pursue these other things. I can be able to film. I can be able to run a film festival. So I actually started by just sharing my knowledge because I was already an entrepreneur. The first thing I did, Annie, believe it or not, I had a shop in Parramatta at a shopping center
Yes.
with a group of women. So we came together and started a shop called African Village Market, right?
Village market,
And
hey.
so, and we were selling all sorts of, African stuff,
Yeah.
clothing, accessories, decorations. And then while we were selling at the shop, I became aware of e-commerce. And so I went into e-commerce. I was doing drop shipping. I had this website. And so then people started coming to me, oh my goodness, we love your website. We love the outfits. Can you teach us what to do? And so what happened was me just sharing my e-commerce knowledge with friends. So little did I know that those impromptu teachings were just moments laying the foundation for something which I would probably call extraordinary. As I continue to share my knowledge and experiences, I realized that I had this genuine passion for teaching that I had not anticipated. The more I taught, the more I realized how rewarding it was to see others succeed and achieve their goals. And so it was through this process that I began to realize my natural inclination towards coaching and guiding others in their business ventures. And so over time, I just dedicated myself to honing my skills and getting better in coaching. And I got into business coaching.
Wow. You know, you have so much confidence, Mumbi. I spend a huge amount of time with women of color. I'm a business coach as well. I
Yeah.
spend a lot of time supporting women of color. And now I'm supporting white women as well who are brand new to coaching and they're building the foundations of their business. So the early stages of building a coaching business. And I have to tell you, for the women of color, for the Black women, it is such a big hurdle. One of the biggest challenges is putting themselves out there, that
Yeah.
self-promotion, that ability to say, this is what I'm skilled at. This is the problem that I can solve for you. I'd love to support you. It is so hard for them to do. They would rather go and continue building on their skills as a way to feel like I'm doing something, I'm making progress. But you're actually shying away from solving doing the work, taking action.
Yeah.
And so I look at you and I'm just like, wow, you are so there's just something different about you. You have a tenacity that a lot of people do not have. And it is so refreshing to see. I was looking at your YouTube channel and you're there, you're doing video after video, you're just sharing yourself. And there's this almost innate courage that's inside of you. Is this how you feel about yourself, or do you just psych yourself up to be visible? Is it a natural thing for you, Mumbi?
Annie, no, it is not. And I love that you've asked me this because I see that as well as a business coach. People are so afraid. But for me, one of the things that has helped me is honestly being in the same situation with people who either have done what you want to do or are trying to do. And one thing I've realized is even the people you look up to are afraid. Yeah. I was listening
Yeah.
to this Audible by Mel Robbins. And one of the things she was talking about, I think she used to be a presenter for CNN. And she talked about how she used to be scared. She actually used to break into hives before every time before she goes on TV because she was that nervous, right? For me, I think just learning that people still do it scared,
Yeah.
it has helped me. And then realizing that some of the things you're worried about, really, it comes from somewhere and you need to address that. And for me, one of the things that helped me, Annie, was understanding my background. I grew up in an environment where when you are in school, it was okay to be laughed at when you make a mistake,
Mhm.
right? And that would be many people who grew up in some environments. It was okay for a teacher, if you make a one of the worst things you could have done in a school when I was growing up in Kenya was to make a mistake,
Yeah.
right? And so people are carrying all these traumas with them, right? You remember that person who was laughed at. You remember that teacher who called you stupid or foolish for
Yes.
getting the wrong answer. So you grow up always afraid to make mistakes. And if you go into a room right now, Annie, safe here in Australia, and there'll be a few, say, let me say Kenyans, right? I don't want to speak for everybody. Let me
Yeah.
speak for Kenyans because I know the Kenyan experience in schools.
Mhm.
So if we have Kenyans and non-Kenyans, let me say Australians, and the opportunity comes to speak up, many people will hesitate, right? People who are bright, people who are clever, people who know the answer, but you still have that trauma of sounding foolish or looking foolish. And, so for me, that is something, even now, I still feel, sometimes I just want to talk in a room, but I'm very, very, very conscious.
Mhm.
So, but for me, understanding that about myself made me cut myself some slack and go like, you know what? I'm feeling like this because, I was made to feel like this. I grew up in an environment where being wrong was not encouraged.
Yeah. Mm.
So understanding that makes you kind of a little bit more brave. You're like, you know what? I don't like, and let me tell you, I judged myself so much. I remember when I was starting to do my YouTube videos, I used to watch the video. I love the message, but I criticize myself so much. I
Yeah.
remember once there's a video I didn't post because I was like, my t-shirt looked too creased. That was it. Right. And I've been through all that. And even now, sometimes like my video, like my, a speech that I've done for the film festival, someone will be sharing and I'm like, no, I don't want to watch myself, because it's still there. So
Wow.
you feel afraid, but you still do it. I'll give you one more example.
Sure.
Jacinta Ardern, who was the former Prime Minister of New Zealand,
Yes.
I went to a breakfast last year where she was talking, and she talked about how she doubted herself, even right before she was prime minister, and even during the time she was prime minister. She started to believe what people are saying about her, but she still went ahead and, led a country.
She
So
did.
it's
And
not to
what's
say that, yeah.
And sorry to cut you short. And what stood apart for Jacinda Ardern was the fact that she did things differently. She
Mhm.
was a leader who led firmly but gently. She showed us how to be human. She showed us how to care. She showed
Yes.
us what it looked like to do leadership in a very, very different way
Mm.
that wasn't through the patriarchy. And boy, was that received so strongly around the world.
Yes, yes, I agree. And she actually said she reached out to a guy who was a politician who seemed very brave. And even when the media attacked him, he would retaliate. And so she went to him and said, my goodness, how do you do it? How are you so confident of yourself? And he was so appalled that she thought he was the go-to person. He was like, absolutely, why would you want to be human, feel those things? Because that is what will make you connect with people so genuinely, because you're feeling all that kind of stuff. So I
Yes.
love what you've said, because it's actually spot on, and she said it.
Mm, mm. You have a way of articulating yourself that keeps taking me back home to Kenya. It keeps taking me back. You know, when you spoke about being in school, I have gone back to so many scenarios where
Mm.
students were being, vilified by
Mhm.
teachers,
Mhm.
statements were made, and they stay with you for life. I remember a
Yes.
particular little boy who is a grown-up man now with kids, I'm sure. but the words that were spoken to him, and I've shared it with different people in my family and a couple of close friends who we went to school with, and they're like, how was that teacher permitted to be a teacher and to speak to a child like that? And they were being vilified for their body and how they looked like, and it was just so horrendous, you know. And so as you take us back to those things that have shaped us, those things that we have been deposited in our psyche, so to speak, and have made us who we are today, we've almost got to fight to get out of that grip. We've got to fight and get to where we want to go to, because there's so many things that are holding us back, Mumbi. There's so many things. What a parent said, what a teacher said, what a peer said, and they're just holding you back. And if you listen to that, and if you allow that to be the voice that is the loudest in your mind, you will never move forward.
That's right. That's right.
And I feel like it requires so much discipline to still go ahead and post with that creased t-shirt, and you're like, yeah, it's not perfect, but I hope the right person hears and finds this video and hears the message that I'm putting across, and not so much how I look like or how I am presented. And what comes to mind, Mumbi, as I'm sharing this, is the extra hurdles that we have to face as Black women. There's already that hurdle that you're dealing with personally. There are those self-limiting beliefs that you hold on to, or that are holding on to you. And then there is the lack of equitable opportunities, particularly in a country where you're not seeing yourself represented. How have you, as a Black successful business coach, filmmaker, how have you navigated that?
Hey, Annie, I'm trying to think, how have I navigated? I think it's always work in progress, right? And for me, I believe that when you put yourself out there in the first place, once you put yourself out there and tell the universe, I'm here, and tell, these people, I'm here as a business coach, now you actually have to be there. And so, you're always looking for opportunities. For me, one thing I do is I try and work with people who I know we can, sometimes grow together, whether they're African or not. So in the film world, how I've looked for opportunity is through, because there is, as much as we are marginalized to some extent and there's not as much opportunity, there is also opportunity if you look for it, right? So for example, with the web series we were doing, we just applied for funding through some government funding that was available, as well as like private investors. And so one of the things I've learned is about the law of probability. Annie, if I need somebody to give me $1, if the first person says no and I ask the next, somebody will say yes, right? So you have to keep asking, you have to keep asking, you have to keep reaching out, and do not let that first, second, third no stop you, right? You just have to keep pursuing. But then also sometimes you have to realize that you have to set your own foundations. And that's one of the things I've been talking about a lot, that we have to support each other, right? Sometimes I talk about us as women, sometimes I talk about us as migrants. And one of the examples I give is, and I can't quite quote these numbers as accurate, but it shows how much, let's not necessarily about money, but I'll talk about money in this sense. They talk about money within certain communities and how long it takes before that money leaves the community, right? So for example, the Chinese, that money will circulate within their communities a lot longer before they spend it elsewhere, right? So for the white or Caucasians, that money will spend, quite a bit of time. But when it comes to us Black people, it's just a matter of hours. As long as your money is in, you are like you will support others, and not to say that you have to spend your money within your community. You don't have to. But then someone said something very cool, that sometimes people think someone else's from another community, their ice is cooler, right? So we are very slow to support each other. And so I just feel like if we are going to thrive as a community, sorry, that's my dog. He's like, you've taken so long trying to say hello. So I think one of the things we have to do is we have to grow together as a community. And that's one thing that has helped me, because I align myself with, people who I feel are reaching towards similar goals as myself. And I'm like, are you interested in doing these things together? Right? Like I did at a workshop with Anastasia in September. And, let's start doing these things. We can't just be attending workshops and conferences, we need, we need to create. So we did one, which went so well that we're having another one in September. And in fact, we've also added someone else to be one of the presenters at the workshop. And, maybe one day it's just going to be this thing at Darling Harbor.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is so awesome. If you can see that representation, you need to go and create it yourself. You need to be the ones who are, spearheading these things. I love that you're taking action so much. I want to ask you one final question before your dog gets super restless.
I think,
But within the coaching and personal development industry, it is so dominated by, people from the dominant culture. In this case, for us here in Australia, is white folks, right? There isn't much representation of people of color, either as coaches or even as clients. What do you think, in your perspective, Mumbi, white coaches could do to be more inclusive and have more racial representation in their businesses?
in terms of who they're working with or their clients?
In terms of both, really, in terms of just if you want to work with a coach, there are certain things that you'd look for. And there are certain things that come up and you're like, I don't know if that person who is white will be able to fully hold space for me and who I am. But then there are others who are indeed white, but there's something about them. There's something about them that just makes you feel seen, you feel comfortable, and you're like, yeah, I could have this person as my coach because there's an element of a sense of belonging. I'm not trying to fit in and kind of be the client, the ideal client for them. And so my question is really around how do we see more inclusivity in the coaching and personal development industry?
I think in terms of connecting with, say people of color for the coaches, I feel like people have to do the work. You see, like what organizations are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things we were saying is there's someone who I met the Governor General a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things we talked about was someone who asked me a question about Africa because they thought Africa was a country, right? A journalist thought Africa was a country.
Wow.
And one of the things she said is that people have been too lazy to, like people are becoming a bit lazy to know some of these things, because you would expect if you're being held responsible for giving international news to people that you have a basic understanding of what the globe looks like. I feel like people need to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? Talk the talk. You need to do the work within yourself, right? And it's not possible to understand each and everybody, but you really have to start finding ways to know, okay, there is a world beyond, these people. And how do you know? You read, you interact with these people, you attend their, whatever it is, whether it's diversity. But then also, I feel like you would have to invest in people who are specifically helping organizations and coaches to do that because they exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the ladies I know called Gloria, that's what she does.
Yeah.
She talks about diversity and inclusion. So I feel like someone needs to invest in doing that. There is no other way because, and as we know, there are so many nuances and assumptions,
Absolutely.
especially that people have about people. And before, I used to get upset when someone just looks at you and they already imagine you must be, from this kind of a background, or you must be, coming from these types of problems.
Yes.
No?
Oh, yes.
So I feel like coaches must invest in diversity. And you see, for me, even myself as a business coach, I'm not just a business coach for African women, I'm a business coach for women. So
Yes.
I have a responsibility to understand, okay, so this is my background, this is my understanding of
Mm-hmm.
what women need, but then how do I then know what women who grew up differently from myself, what are
Absolutely.
their needs, what are their pain points, what are their experiences that have shaped who they are today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, one of the things, I put myself in groups, right? I go to group coaching where you'll hear people's experiences and people's needs. And I think that helps me kind of have a better understanding um, of all these clients. But then also one-on-one coaching
Mm-hmm.
is very powerful with that. So anyway, to answer your question, I just feel like people have to do the work and invest in
Absolutely.
getting somebody, because otherwise it just takes longer. Hire somebody,
Mm-hmm.
invest in courses, and get to learn more about other people.
You've just reaffirmed something that I have spoken about on the podcast before, and that is that you have got to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion in your work as a coach. It's not something that's on the side that is a good to have. It's part and parcel of how you do life, and it's also part and parcel of how you do business. And so, if you want to attract and work with people from various backgrounds, you've got to do the work. And it's not just you, white person, doing the work. We, as people of color, are doing an enormous amount of work to understand the people who we are dealing with, the people who we are in spaces with, so that we are better able to connect. And so the reverse needs to happen, that you've got to do the same as well. I want to end by asking a little bit about your business, Mumpreneur Society. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Mumbi?
So Mumpreneur Society is perhaps a continuation of what I described, how I became a business coach, right? But then the reason why Mumpreneurs is basically for moms, because I was an entrepreneur in this country and then became a parent shortly after I had gone into entrepreneurship. And so I was in this situation where I was a mom, I was trying to start a business. Those two, being a mom, lot of work, hard. Being an entrepreneur, hard. Both of them stressful. So I was in this situation where I'm a new mom, I'm trying to grow a business. It was crazy. I jumped through so many hurdles and I was just teaching myself. I was watching YouTubes, I was investing in courses, and I thought, my goodness, I really need to help women. Yeah, I really need to help moms jump through a few hurdles because it takes a very long time. When I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this for, um, you know, even more than 10 years, actually. I forgot to mention that I used to sell paintings in 2009 when I was new in Sydney. So this has been going on for a while. And so I thought I really need to help moms jump through those hurdles and really learn how to start a business from somebody who has been there and somebody who understands, because one of the things, Annie, is things that are available are not friendly to moms,
Yes.
right? So something that allows flexibility, somebody who
Absolutely.
understands
A bit. Mm-hmm.
what it means to try and run a business and be a parent at the same time.
Oh, that is amazing. And I'm going to pop a link to that website for people to check out and see what you have to offer there. My very, very final question to you is, if fear was not a factor, Mumbi, how would you show up in your work?
If fear was not a factor, Annie, geez, the things I would have done. So I would show up in a lot more places. I would speak a lot more than I do because sometimes I see opportunities and I feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Even today, I feel like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. So some opportunities I let go because I feel like I need to prepare myself a little bit
Mm.
more for these. And so I think if fear was not a factor, right now I would probably be speaking in some very big stages because I'd feel like, because that's one of my biggest goal. I want to be, a speaker. I am already a speaker, but I really want to make an impact through speaking, through sharing my journey. I have a lot to offer, but every now and then I kind of tell myself, oh, I need to be a little bit more prepared for these. Um, I think I'll be more outspoken. Sometimes you think things but don't say them because like you want to be safe. I know that about myself. And, I'm still trying to figure out, do I want to be this bold person who speaks their mind? I'm still not yet there. So yes, I would be speaking on very big stages and I would really speak my mind on so many factors. But I think a lot of my background and upbringing is still in the works. But Annie, I am getting there. All I can say is watch this space and I accept. You said I am blessed,
Mhm.
I don't think about it that way, but as you said it, I was like, oh my God, of course, of course I am. And so I'm receiving that and I'm receiving those blessings and I am so excited to see those blessings growing and taking me to other places that I want to be.
I would love to see you on a huge platform speaking the way you've spoken to me here. There's something about you. I don't say this about everybody, but Mombi, there's something really, really special about you. I know that you've been nominated. You are a finalist for One to Watch with Mumpreneur,
Yes,
one of the organizations here in Australia. And I
yes.
just want to wish you the best with that
Thank you.
category. And I hope you take it out because we do need that representation. And a win for you
Yes.
is a win for
Thank
all of
you. I
us.
actually got nominated for two. It was One to Watch and also multicultural business. So
Wow,
yes,
wow.
fingers crossed.
Absolutely. And what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say is a
yeah.
win for you is a win for all of us. It is not an individual thing. Anytime you see a Black woman receive an
Mm,
award, even just as
mm.
we're watching the Olympics at the time of recording this
Yeah,
podcast, every time we see Black women or Black men get a medal, we feel like it's us. We're like,
yes.
there we go. We are being
Yeah.
represented. Look at
We
us.
really own them. We're like, we won.
Exactly. Look at this Black excellence. And it feels
Yes,
good. And
yes.
that's because of that historical, that history of being sidelined, that history of being not represented, of being held back, of being seen under a lens that we don't identify with, one that is negative. And so when we
Mm,
see that kind of excellence, we want to own it because we see what we're made of.
that is
And
so true.
so it's been so wonderful having you on here. Where can people connect with you? Where do you spend most of your time?
I spend most of my time, so you can find me through my business coaching, which is Mumpreneur Society. And that is the name on Instagram. That's the name on Facebook. That's the name on YouTube, the YouTube channel. And I promise you there are more videos coming. And then on my creative side, we just launched an African Film Festival a couple of weeks ago. So Africa Film Fest, Australia, that's where we'll be telling the stories
Oh,
for us and by
wonderful.
us.
For us and by us. I
Yes,
love it so much.
yes.
Mumbi, I have loved this conversation so much. Honestly, I felt like I was just sitting down and talking to a sister, a true sister
I
of
know.
mine. Thank you so much. And I just want to wish you the very best. You're a
Thank
shining light, you're a rising star. I can't wait to see what the world holds for you. Mumbi is a name to know. Check her out. Go to the show notes and follow her. She's amazing. Thank you, Mumbi.
thank you, Annie.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented from coast to coast.